All right, let's talk about Michael Jackson. There's really no simple way to do it, is there? Because you're talking about two completely different stories. On one side, you have the king of pop, an absolute global icon who changed music forever. And on the other, you have a man at the center of some of the most disturbing accusations you can imagine. How do those two things exist in the same person? That's what we're going to try and unpack.
You know, this quote from author Susan Fast really gets to the heart of it all. Jackson had this presence on stage that was just electric. It was magnetic, almost hypnotic. And as she says, it was a sexualized presence. And that exact energy is what mesmerized millions, but it might also be what made some people feel threatened, and it kind of lays the groundwork for the whole controversy that would follow him for the rest of his life.
Okay, so before we can even begin to get into the controversy, you have to understand the sheer scale of the phenomenon. We've got to start with just how massive his success was as the king of pop.
Let's rewind to 1982. Michael Jackson drops an album, and it's not just any album. We are talking about Thriller. And this thing wasn't just a hit record. It was a cultural earthquake. It literally transformed the entire landscape of popular music.
I mean, the numbers are just staggering. Thriller was the first album in history to be certified 30 times platinum in the US alone. Think about that. This wasn't just about breaking records. This was about inventing a whole new level of superstardom that no one had ever seen before.
But honestly, the sales don't even tell half the story. The cultural impact was a tidal wave. Beat It brought pop and rock together with that legendary Eddie Van Halen guitar solo. And get this, a very young, very white rock-focused MTV initially refused to play the video for Billie Jean. His label had to fight them on it. And when they finally aired it, it was so popular, it didn't just help build MTV into a giant, it shattered the channel's racial barrier, blowing the doors wide open for a whole generation of black artists. The music videos themselves, they were short films, pure cinematic art. The Thriller video is literally in the National Film Registry, a music video. It's just incredible.
And here's the crucial part. It wasn't just about catchy songs. This was pure innovation. With the legendary Quincy Jones at his side, Jackson and his team used the recording studio itself like it was an instrument. They were literally warping technology, pushing it to its absolute limits to create sounds that nobody had ever heard before, sounds that only existed in their heads.
So you've just released the biggest album in the history of the world. What's the encore? Well, if you're Michael Jackson, you don't play it safe, you rip up the playbook and you head in a new, much more dangerous direction.
And that's exactly what happened with his 1991 album, Dangerous. This was a huge pivot. He actually parted ways with his legendary partner, Quincy Jones, basically to claim total creative control. He stepped away from those feel-good pop anthems and started diving into darker, more personal, more political themes.
Just like one reviewer put it, he became this sensual, political, even dangerous animal. He was no longer just the lovable pop star that everyone knew. He was a performance artist, and he was actively challenging his audience and the very industry that had made him a star in the first place.
But here's the thing. As his art got more and more complex, so did his public image. And it was right around this time that the first, and let's be honest, the most damaging, cracks in that pristine reputation really started to show.
This whole public controversy didn't just happen overnight. It unfolded across 3 decades. It really began in 1993 with an accusation that was ultimately settled out of court for a huge sum of money, with no criminal charges ever filed. Then we jumped to 2005, when it led to a full-blown criminal trial, where he was actually acquitted of all charges. But even that wasn't the end of it. Because in 2019, the whole thing came roaring back to life for a new generation.
That was thanks to the Emmy-winning documentary, Leaving Neverland. It brought all the allegations storming back into the cultural conversation, and it created this incredibly stark public divide. You pretty much had to pick a side. You either believed the accusers in the film, or you believed Michael Jackson was the victim of an elaborate lie.
And man, was that divide clear. Just look at this. The critics called the film things like devastating and undeniably persuasive. But the public? A totally different story. That 26% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, that shows a massive backlash from fans who launched their own campaigns and challenged every claim the film made.
So all of this leaves us with what you can only call a fundamentally fractured legacy. We're left with two powerful, completely contradictory stories about the same person, just existing right alongside each other.
And this really lays it all out. On one side you have the artist. 13 Grammys, 26 American Music Awards, named Artist of the Century, and a 1997 survey even called him the most famous person on the entire planet.
And then, on the other side, you have the accused, a man shadowed by these persistent allegations, those out-of-court settlements, and a legal acquittal that, for many, failed to end the debate at all.
And that leads us to this final question, and there's just no easy answer to it. How do we remember an artist whose life is so incredibly complex and controversial while their art is so universally celebrated? That right there, that's the central conflict. And it's the reason why the conversation around Michael Jackson and his two very different legacies will probably never, ever end.